Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Xcession Everything Service Management podcast. I'm Daniel Gilby, joined as always by my co-host Sunil.
Hello.
And today we've got a couple of great guests for our listeners. We've got Jaro Tomik and Matt Dowling joining us from CDW. Matt, Jaro, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
So perhaps for those of our listeners out there who don't know who Jaro and Matt are, maybe you could just give us a quick intro and then we can get on to the session.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just kick start. So yeah, it's my title, Chief Technologist for what we call Digital Enablement at CDW UK. That ultimately covers the areas of enterprise service management and intelligent automation. So think of all the various abbreviations such as ITSM, ESM, ITAM, ITOM, IPaaS, AIOps, all of those wonderful things, including CRM and so forth, right? Yeah, absolutely loving it. CDW, been there for about 4 years. Before that, I was working for kind of a DevOps culture change consultancy. Before that, for a service management provider. So kind of I've got that service management as well as sort of a DevOpsy slightly background, but spend most of my time in sales. And my job right now is to continuously research the market, identify the up and coming players, understand the trends in the market, and then communicating that back with our customers and internally in the form of blogs, in the form of speaking on stage or podcasts like we're doing today. And really everything I do is hopefully working for the benefit of Matt.
Certainly is. Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Dowling, Head of Practice for Digital Enablement. So I take sort of Jaro's, he generates lots of excitement, curiosity, thought leadership with the wider market. I spend a little bit more time with the customers just to turn that into more reality and making it stick longer term. We have a broad portfolio of technology platforms, but it's not just about the tech. It's the adoption and making sure it's right for the customer. And even in say 2, 3, 5 years, they're very happy with that purchase.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jaro. Thank you very much, Matt. And one of the reasons, we've got you guys together to talk with us is because we've recently entered into a partnership with CDW, Xcession and CDW, to see because I think a lot of our kind of themes around customer success and business outcomes and what we see in the market all align. So really interested to kind of hear your views and take the conversation forward. So I know you had a bit of a background sort of scene set for the session itself, and then we can get onto the bit of the Q&A.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much, Dan, and great to have you guys with us, Matt. And for anyone who's listening that doesn't have a TLA dictionary, send us an email and then we can explain to you what all those 3-letter acronyms actually mean at a later date. Just queuing you up there, Jaro. So the topic of the podcast, or the subject matter for the podcast today, we have a well-established ITSM and enterprise service management market, but yet it is growing very rapidly and it is extremely fragmented. There is one dominant market leader in ServiceNow. I think everybody knows that. But yet we have a lot of mid-market players, some who've been in the market for a long time, some who are new to the market. And everyone seems to really be trying to grab that market share. We've got new spend as organizations look to broaden out from IT to enterprise service management. We have displacement activity, people who, had a particular solution for 3-6 years and then decide it's not right anymore. There's also lots of different flavors of solutions. Everyone's talking about integrating AI, but ServiceNow have pushed very hard at agentic. Others are a bit slower in terms of the generative AI capabilities they're bringing in. There's a whole raft of different takes on integrations and how they happen. You have toolbox versus non-toolbox. There's an awful lot going on in this marketplace. So I guess really what we wanted to do was to really try and get under the skin of how you guys at CDW see the market and how you guys are addressing the complex challenges that customers put in front of you. So hopefully that's okay from a background perspective. Question number one, and I think I'm pointing this at you, Jaro, to start us off, is so how do you see the market today? What's the sort of CDW view? What are some of the trends that customers are talking to you guys about?
Oh, you're on mute, Jaro.
Yeah, sorry, just noticed. I didn't want to make any background noises in the meantime as Sunil was talking. So yeah, ultimately what we're seeing is that there is the battle of platforms right now. And strangely enough, it's no longer a battle in the service management top tier of the market. As you say, ServiceNow have sort of run away and have been running away for a long time. And that's also, I guess, one of the reasons behind Gartner kind of putting the ITSM Magic Quadrant on hold, and that's why we didn't see it, because there just wasn't enough exciting stuff happening. I guess Atlassian went into the top right corner for a little bit, but other than that, you know, it was kind of not as exciting, I think, as they would probably like. And maybe even customers. I mean, imagine having a serious contender to ServiceNow in that right top corner. That might also lead to some interesting results. And you know, I know we just spoke before the podcast about the news about Salesforce entering the ITSM market in December, and I think that's quite an exciting, potentially exciting announcement. But overall, what we're seeing is if you're a really large enterprise, the go-to, you know, is ServiceNow. Some are holding on to the BMCs or Ivantis, especially if they've spent a lot of money in that market. But I think the key thing is the key change, that's the shift that's happening in the market, is the other departments almost waking up to the idea that there is this enterprise grade tool in IT, and if we're HR, you know, if we need to do field management, if we're in legal, if we're in facilities, we're not leveraging the power of the platform potentially as much as we could. In fact, the stat goes that on average, customers only leverage about 13% of the platform that they're paying for. And I think that's really key, is that we're kind of seeing the customers wanting to get more out of what they already have, rather than them, especially in the large enterprise market, looking for various alternatives. And that makes it less interesting from the new challengers, I guess, because it might be more difficult market to penetrate, but it makes it a more exciting market for those who enable these organizations to for the customers to do more with what they already have, or just add a couple of licenses or whatever, but develop their solutions further so they can automate a lot more the way they deliver their service.
I'm just going to follow that up. I think that's really interesting, Jaro. I'm going to ask Matt, because Matt, you're a little bit more involved, aren't you, in terms of the longer term delivery of outcomes to customers. Jaro said that other departments like, you know, finance, facilities, HR, etc., are only just waking up to the power of these platforms. Why has it taken them so long, do you think, to start to look at this as a digital transformation opportunity? What is it that's, I mean, because, you know, to us in this world, it's a bit of a no-brainer, right? But why do you think it's taken so long to get here?
I think it's understanding some of those wider business challenges. So IT environments are traditionally, and they still are, quite complex beasts. Lots of interdependencies, lots of different platforms and different expertise. Other departments like HR, payroll, finance, procurement, maybe traditionally they have worked quite well in a siloed bubble, but they're starting to join together with IT. IT have broken down a lot of those barriers and silos, and they're starting to think about what are those wider processes. Something like joiners, movers, leavers is a really good example. That touches most of those departments already. It's not just about IT anymore. And when you look at what IT have managed to do, they're capturing the information once. You're not phoning or emailing or Teams messages or Slacks, whichever direction it goes in 5 or 10 times. Businesses want a simple, unified experience. Submit it once with the right data, track those approvals. Then you've got the audit trail. And so then, in the joiners example, they can start in a turnkey process. It's reliable, but from an end user, new starter experience, they've got the equipment, it's built correctly with the software, they've got the access, and small detail, but it is quite important, they're paid on the first pay date. Always a nice thing to do.
Is that what we do this morning?
Arguably one of the most important details, Matt, but I suppose it depends who you speak to. But that's very interesting. I mean, I was good, the siloed element there, that's really starting. I mean, that's been a discussion point in service management for a long time, right? So it's interesting to kind of hear that organizations are potentially now starting to appreciate that can be broken down effectively, and everybody's not having to look after their little fiefdoms or however they see it within the business. No, very, very interesting. So just moving on then to the sort of second talking point we had lined up. CDW work like Xcession with a number of different solution providers going to market. Can you tell us, perhaps for you, Matt, how do you approach kind of doing that matchmaking exercise for the customer and then translating that to building the most appropriate solution for them, given that collectively all of us here, I think we can all agree that what we have in mind is certainly for the customer's best interest and for their business outcomes. How do you then kind of put those pieces together and get that messaging across to the people in the business who you're supporting? Walk us through that.
Yeah, well, will do. Thank you. And it is a great question. We get asked it a lot. And, with existing customers or new customers, we're always asked what makes us unique in this space. The truth is, it's not just about picking a piece of software, and it's not a tick list to go, here are these features, here's the best one for you. It's understanding that customer's world, the wider ecosystem, their goals, their frustrations, and what success actually looks like for them. And that could be that immediate go live, or it could be in 2, 3, 5 years' time. So we try and position ourselves as a strategic partner, not just as a reseller. We're not just selling these platforms. I think you call out ServiceNow, there's Freshworks, there's Halo, there's about 200 others,
Yeah.
But as you start diving into, you cherry pick a few that makes them unique, you start understanding with those platforms, alongside of listening to the customer, which ones fit best. And we've had customers come to us mid-contract. They might be frustrated with, say, adoption, or they're overwhelmed with customization, or there's lots of shelfware. And that's when we step in. It's not just to rescue that situation, but just resetting that approach. Look at what's already in place, what's outside that immediate system, and what's being used and what's being ignored. And we just try and build that roadmap that's realistic, it's scalable, and it's focused on those business outcomes. And when you start opening up with that, it's less about these short-term fixes and going, I've got an ITSM or ESM tool. It's a budget line item. I want to save money, or I want to rip and replace. It's more about these longer term contracts. It might be 3 years, might be 5 years, and it isn't just about simple implementation. They want more of a stable, predictable approach, and a trusted partnership. Someone who's in it for the long haul with them.
Can I ask a question on this, Matt? And Jaro, obviously, feel free to jump in. Is it really about technical features and capability of platforms, or is it as much about total cost of ownership, as much about complexity and your ability to find people with the right skills to manage and continually develop the platform? Is it about the interface with the solution provider, whether that's CDW or the vendor of the software, whoever that may be? I mean, what's the mix or the balance, do you think, that customers are looking at here? Because often vendors, I think, just sort of approach it from a feature capability perspective, don't they? I think it's much more than that.
I think it depends. I think each customer is fairly unique, but there are certainly trends in different points of the market. So, so say local gov, that's very different to the SMB end of the market, and that's very different to multinationals, global business services, GBS, and follow the sun models. So that value-driven approach, it is quite different, and I think that's where I like working with multiple trusted partners, especially Xcession. They listen to the customer, they listen to why, they understand those markets and those trends and what that value could look like. Because maybe sometimes these customers, they don't fully appreciate or understand what is that ROI or what's driving that value. Is it just that ticketing, that basic sort of passing the post-its around? Or is it solving those wider business challenges? And it doesn't, I think there's enough experience now. ITSM, ESM, as an example, it's been going for 20, 30 plus years. It's not, it doesn't have to be breaking fresh ground every time, which is why we like to offer very lightweight advisory. It doesn't have to be big for 500K, 6 months plus to get a report. You can get going with some best practices and lessons learned from the wider industry.
Yeah. What do you think, Jaro?
Yeah, I think absolutely, obviously agree with Matt. That's why we work together also, is because we share a lot of sort of approaches to the market, understanding of the market. It's great. I would say there is also a little bit of who has used what already. If you have some new leader that's already, let's say, used Freshworks, let's call it, and a previous organization goes to work for a similarly sized organization, there will be some sort of internal push, if you like, from them, especially they're in the leadership, like CIO or something like that, to bring the stuff that they have already seen working somewhere else into that organization and make it work in our, because average lifespan of a CIO in an organization is 18 months, right? So you have a fairly short period of time. If you think about choosing a tool set, RFPs, all of that good stuff, implementation, time to value, right? Enablement, by the 12-month mark, if you started on day one choosing this, you might be seeing some sort of result, right? So and they will obviously have way more technologies than just enterprise service management on their list. So I think what's really key is also people's individual experience with different platforms that often plays more of that sentimental role in the selection. And what we're then seeing is the organizations trying to work with the vendors in sort of a smart way in molding the RFP so that it gets them to the functionalities that they want, right? And whatever works for anybody. From our perspective, what really is important is that they get something that works for their business, and that's ultimately not linked just to what works for IT or for those individual departments, but it works towards the wider business goals, whether that is revenue, whether that is growth in the market, whether that is staying alive, whether that is keeping other people alive in healthcare, right? Whatever the business model is, it's very important that the new tool that they're bringing in fits in, does not create too much more complications or technical debt down the line, is fairly easy to manage, and for the teams that they have and the capabilities that they have, and it ultimately enables that link to delivering the wider business value. That's a big shift that we're seeing in the market. It's no longer just about IT choosing for IT. It's about IT choosing to benefit the wider business.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly relevant. And we do this podcast frequently, regularly, and talking to customers, there's one thing that I think that comes up a lot that, because customers talk about it, but doesn't come up quite so much when we talk to other parties that are involved in the whole mix. And that is the relationship that exists between the customer and the software vendor, right? Customers always say they want the vendor at the table in a partnership.
Mm.
And yet it sort of slightly amazes me that vendors don't make more of an effort, some of them, to be there. They're being invited in, and it's not just for a kick-in, guys. It's actually to be able to set the roadmap for the future. It's an interesting one. Anyway, let's move on from that. So let's have a think about, you mentioned platforms earlier, Jaro. So let's have a think about sort of data integrations and centralization, consolidation of data, and then AI. So everyone's favorite topic at the moment. There is definitely great opportunity. The question perhaps that isn't quite so clear is, how do organizations access and really make value out of the opportunity there? So what are you guys talking to customers about? What sort of things do you think customers should be building to get the foundations in place to take advantage of this opportunity? So Jaro, I think over to you for this one.
Sure. What customers want to talk about is how we can help them solve their challenges. And that challenge might be as straightforward as, my CIO just told me that we need to be leveraging AI and we've got 6 months to do it. Where do I begin? Like, how do I do this, right? Do you have something out of the box I can install, I can switch on and just make it work? Yeah, we often get that. And then the next question I love to ask, and I believe Matt is doing the same, is, how is your CMDB? And that's where all the fun starts, because they start realizing, well, okay, we need to kind of go often back to basics and have a look at how do we create that solid foundation, so that when we start applying these smart technologies, sometimes smart, sometimes not so smart, but we start applying that automation. It's really key that it hallucinates as little as possible. So that's why we have this product called Brilliant Basics, where we help our customers to really identify their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. We look for certain threats to those projects. We do a bit of a gap analysis, and we're then able, whatever platform that is, to do a fairly quick assessment of the current state. And just like ITIL says, start where you are, right? So that's exactly what that's about, understanding the landscape. And then we're able to say, okay, you as a customer, we understand, I'm working on a project with a customer right now, your knowledge management is really, really poor, right? Let's have a look at that. Let's maybe have a look at how we can leverage AI, how we can leverage your existing knowledge across the organization to create a solid base of data, so that we can start applying maybe generative AI to standardize it, to create some of the knowledge, to start using the data we're getting through the service desk to create more knowledge articles, and how we can then gradually push that further and further to the left to do exciting things like self-heal and aim towards that zero-ticket future, because I believe that's where really the whole industry is going. It's the idea of the IT. If you look at the purpose of IT, from my perspective anyway, is to serve the business, right? To help the business function. And I think we often forget that. We just do IT for the sake of IT, and we change infrastructure or whatever else just because it's cool stuff and we want new tech to play about with. It happens, right? What we often forget is why IT exists. And when you look at it from that perspective, okay, so what are we doing as an IT team to help that business? And when we're then making all of those different changes, it's really key that we start understanding the link. And that zero-ticket future, what that helps us to understand is, and I've kind of used this quote quite a few times now, trying to claim it really, is if the end user, so employee or whoever, had to raise a ticket, we have already failed them. Basically meaning that we should already have all the data about their laptop performance, about their email functionality, about their interaction with the business, to be able to say, hey, Mary, I appreciate your laptop has been booting up for 7 minutes, whilst the average across the company is 3 minutes, and you have had your device for 3 years. Would you like us to have a look at this? Or since you're working from home, would you like us to send you a new pre-configured device, right? Because you're already eligible. So Mary does not have to think about this stuff. She does not have to waste time, obviously, with her laptop booting for a long time, trying to do it herself, trying to restart the laptop and whatever, wasting a lot of productivity time. And I think this is really what we need to start looking at as an IT industry is how do we gear up towards that zero ticket? How do we reduce the pressure, the frustration we're currently imposing on the end users because we don't have our own departments working well enough?
How far away, Matt, are some of your customers to that future that Jaro's talking about? Or how close, maybe, is the question?
They're certainly excited. I think there's lots of content and ideas out there to say, look, this is the art of the possible. And actually, there are already those use cases to show, look, this is how agentic AI, route to a zero tickets can be done. But I think there is still a lot of work needed with some of our customers just to get some of those basics there. If you just adopt automation and AI and agentic AI, either on very, very generic information or on worse, really bad information, it's just going to automate with chaos. And whenever you adopt it, you just need to make sure that it is adopted safely, cautiously, and factors in what's right for the organization.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because Jaro, you made a comment there saying like customers will come and speak with you and say, we want AI. This CIO has said, we need to get AI in here. And do you think, so there's two parts to this, do you think that there's kind of a question for both of you, I suppose, do you think there's a perception in the market that people think, I've seen AI, it looks great, I can just get that, install it or integrate it, flick a switch, and then that's going to do all these remarkable things, and that there's less of an appreciation that actually these fundamental things like the foundational information, you mentioned the CMDB, need to be addressed? And what's your kind of sense, what's your radar telling you out there? Well, how are people looking at this and I guess absorbing the messaging?
Yeah, I think there's sort of still a misinterpretation of what AI is in the wider market. So in IT, I think most people are kind of up to date with the different kinds of ways of applying artificial intelligence, large language models, LLMs, right? Generative AI, how do we apply machine learning and so forth, right? So they typically at least have some awareness of the different kinds. However, as soon as you start reaching out into the other departments that we now really have to involve if we want to do a good job, again, with that business link and everything else I talked about earlier, I think we're starting to struggle because their understanding of AI is ChatGPT. And they expect when we start talking about, let's use artificial intelligence in HR, they're like, okay, so we're going to get something where whatever we type in, it will just give us some sort of answer. And that's typically not where the biggest gains are. It's quite often is in business process automation, in robotic process automation, in integrations of all these different systems. Like Matt talked about earlier, the joiners, movers, levers, end-to-end process analysis and potentially automation, right? I think they then get a bit too excited about, I will just have ChatGPT for HR and I can just put my legs up on the table and it will do everything for me, versus there's actually quite a lot of in-depth work we'll need to do on your basic data, on accessing it, having the right people access it so that I cannot, find out what my boss is getting paid or whatever, as easily anyway. And also to really, having that education basically is, I think, the element that's still missing, because the general population in our organizations are still thinking that AI is ChatGPT, and I think there's something that we need to do about that.
Are you seeing similar, Matt? Yeah.
I am, yeah, and do see some lights at the end of a tunnel, with some of our customers, but where a lot more are prepared to follow out the box and best practice and have things in the right way, and they do understand that yes, there are all these shiny new toys of AI and agentic AI and zero ticket. Some of our customers have got lucky, they have got everything in the right place, fairly clean instances, clean data sets, whatnot, clean platforms, and they have pretty much switched things on within a week. But that is quite rare. And as we sort of dive into some of our customers and how they're working and their wider platforms, we are just open and honest and say, look, you do need to fix some of the basics and get that right. Here's what that path looks like. And then look, in terms of these business challenges, why do you want to adopt AI? Why do you want to automate things? It turns out that it doesn't have to be a massive transformation project. It doesn't have to be a big bang, switch everything on, and then what does everybody do? It is cherry picking a few quick wins, just to prove a point, see what's possible. And actually, when you start doing that in a safe, considered way, the wider business does actually start supporting it, because it's not directly replacing people. It's not shutting down whole departments or whatnot. It's actually making the same people work a lot smarter, and just cutting out a lot of a very, very basic sort of dual screening, switching between windows and systems, and actually solving those wider business problems, and resulting in, in that way, it's giving them better, faster ROI.
I think, yeah, and I think that ties exactly to the point you were making, Jaro, about Mary with her laptop. She's not having to spend any time contacting the service desk via phone, portal, or whatever. She can focus on her role, being productive 100% of the time, rather than because of the systems that we've just been describing being in place. Okay, so thinking about all the things we've talked about, where do you think the vendors, the ITSM and ESM software vendors, what do they need to think about for the future? Is it going to be agentic AI? I think the answer is probably going to be categorically yes, but given what we've talked about, do they perhaps need to have a bit of a shift back, like a lot of customers, it seems, to focus on the basics? Is that the sort of view? What would you give as an opinion for that if you were to speak to it?
I think,
how would you see it?
The discussion is even broader than that. Is what does service management look like in 5 years' time? Like, how many people are actually involved? Do we need people to be involved, right? So I think there's this wider, bigger discussion, because as soon, and this will happen pretty quick, all things considered, as soon as kind of the decent level of data quality and agentic AI capability reaches us, and I think technology is there, it's just now more or less about the adoption. So we're very close. And there will be a big shift in terms of the skills required in service management. And I'm not just talking IT, I'm talking broader service management, whether you want something resolved from HR, legal, or whoever else. And I think this is what's really going to affect people much more, because now we're talking about people, we're talking about their jobs, and of course we are. If you compare it, and I like to do this comparison a lot, beginning of 20th century, we were shifting from horse-ridden carriages as taxis into motorized taxis as automobiles. That took decades, pretty much, right? That shift. And nowadays, no car taxi drivers really have to get a horse driver's license, and that took a long time. Now, nowadays, though, this is taking a very short time. That's why we're often talking about the VUCA world, right? Where there's a lot of that sort of volatility in the market and uncertainty that we need to deal with. And because the changes are faster and faster, the pace of change is increasing, it's more difficult for people to react to it. So I think the key question there is agentic AI, from my perspective, 100% happening. How do we manage it as people? How do we manage the people? And that's where things like human-centered design, I think, will be what will have to, in the right way, massively influence the way we manage service. Is looking at it from the human perspective, from the perspective of the people that we need to support to do their job better. And even if they will need to, let's say you're a lawyer, and we know you will need to be using some sort of GPT type of tool set or some sort of AI, how do we support those people in using that? How do we ensure that they can self-serve it, whether they work from Thailand or the US in California, they should be able to access that service. And we might no longer have 24/7 service desks. It might just have to be agents. And where do we get the information for those agents to support it to decent enough quality? That's so. Sorry, I'm just throwing up more questions than answers, but that really is kind of what's going on in my head, which is there's a wider instability in the market right now around what does service management look like in 2030.
It's the kind of comes back a little bit to that's Satya Nadella, quite famous podcast that he did or YouTube video I saw on YouTube, where he talks about the disappearance of business rules, right? So you just have an AI agent that queries a database. It can be unstructured, and then has enough knowledge, if for want of a better expression, to be able to contextualize the question and the response. If we apply that thinking to service management, then all of the service management business rules we built up, like ITIL based, that whole framework, actually, well, maybe we don't need it at all. And so therefore, people in those roles have a different question to think about, right?
I personally don't think it's going to quite go away entirely. I just think it will shift very quickly compared to how relatively slowly, it's been shifting over the last 40 years. So suddenly this industry will become more exciting, and that's just me being very positive, right? But if you look at, let's say, Gartner saying that 50% of business decisions will be augmented by AI agents by 2027, that's 2 years' time. Now imagine 50% of IT service management decisions augmented by AI in 2 years. Like we're not ready, I think, mentally ready for this. I'm not even talking about the technology. So that's where we will really need to ensure people are on with us. We take the people with us on that journey, that they don't feel left behind. They may have been doing this job for a long time. They have got certain ways of working, and this shift is coming. It will create, and it's already creating a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. And how do we tackle that from human perspective? That's why I really think things like ITIL, best practices, something to hang on to. Things like education about AI and automation, things like human-centered design will really help us kind of get through it and manage that change. But just like always, this will be primarily a cultural change, secondarily process change, and only there will be some technology to support it. I really think it will be the usual 5% is really the technology impact, but the rest of the change will need to happen within culture and process.
It's a really interesting view, isn't it? Because you've got this almost Nirvana-esque future outlook there, and then immediately on the flip, you can talk to a customer who says, "I need some help with my CMDB, and how can I improve my password reset process?" Because they still have those things there. I've been in IT now coming up to 20 years, and one of the things, like the biggest ticket item was password resets. Single sign-on was going to solve that. It didn't. And then I remember seeing something at SDI earlier this year where one of the vendors was talking about, we've got this great thing now that helps you with your password reset process. And I was thinking, it's 20 years. Surely we should have solved that at least by now. To get to where we are. Why hasn't that been universally dealt with, vaccinated against and eradicated? But here we are, right? And it's interesting that there's a lot of fundamental and foundational aspects that still need to be kind of really bolted down to be able to then leverage this additional technology? I mean, that's just my view, right? I don't know what you guys think.
So there's three questions here. Sorry, there's three questions here, right? One is, I need to do AI. So customers will say, I need to do AI. I need to do CMDB. And so you're saying, Dan, they also have to put in that bucket, I need to do password reset.
Well, possibly, right? We would obviously love to talk to customers who have that challenge and see where we can help, right? Collectively, I'm sure all of us would.
I was just going to add to that you're talking about CMDB and passwords reset not being done. It's exactly the same about ITAM, ITSM management. It's exactly the same about knowledge management. All of these things were pretty well defined and described with the first ITIL iteration, and then improved. So this is since late 80s, and we're still not getting it right. And from my point of view, looking at the market and looking back, it's always been dependent on people. And if it wasn't exciting enough, it usually was one person who enjoyed it, did it, left the organization, and it's not moved on since. And it's just been left in the cupboard and with all the other skeletons and elephants. So, I think it's quite the usual. It's again, it comes back to that cultural change that's just not been tackled well enough. We got all the technology in. You're seeing even in healthcare, right? Them getting certain RPA tools, investing into that, which is great. They should be doing that. They do a couple of first projects, and then it just sort of disappears. And it all links back to not having centers of excellence, not having usual meetups of people who are champions of the technology, not making it part of KPIs, not making it a percentage of their daily workload, not having it in job descriptions. So I'm obviously saying a lot of things that are kind of part of the best practices of driving that cultural change. But because we're not doing that effectively, we're not including that cultural change in the process, the technology is being left abandoned and not utilized. Again, linking back to the 13% utilization I mentioned at the beginning. And Matt, I'm sure you're seeing exactly the same stuff, working with customers where the technology, they have the right technologies and are still not seeing the results, right?
Absolutely. And if I was to highlight a really nice example within ITIL of major incidents where, but theoretically, they should have the right ingredients of a CMDB, what systems are talking to what, and then major incident processes of, something major has gone wrong. It's a critical system. Let's get it fixed as soon as possible. But if those two elements aren't tied in together with a bigger purpose, it's very easy for CMDB to become stale and rotten and very manually processed and updated. Siloed spreadsheets, check my Active Directory tools, Intune tools, or cloud discovery tools. But even major incidents, some system has gone wrong in the middle of the night. Let's phone everybody in. Networks, Unix, database, maybe a few other teams and apps and dev teams. We always blame networks first. It's always a network problem. If you look at it, something like agentic AI, it can help bring together a lot of these different tools, and it's not replacing major incident as a process, and it's not necessarily replacing those first line or a second line people, working overnight, but it helps just get them to the faster, get into the problems faster and resolving incidents a lot quicker. It can go, okay, there's a major incident with this application, there's lots of events, lots of noise, call in the networks team and maybe this particular app support team. So rather than calling in 40 or 50 people with a major bridge call, let's just call in 2 or 3 and get started with that. And I think
you can only do that. You have the data, right? Again, right? You need to know what's going on.
But it's associating, getting those basics right, and then this is the longer term goal, and that's the big win.
But it's still network's fault, right?
It's always network's fault. Always network's fault. It's so fundamentals and foundation. This is a general theme we hear all the time. You guys will know that as well. Sunil, Matt, Jaro, fantastic conversation. Thanks ever so much for taking time to join us today. To all our listeners, I hope you found this interesting and insightful. If you'd like to find out more or reach out to Jaro and Matt, please do get in touch. Both highly visible on LinkedIn. We can drop some links in the comments as well. And yeah, if you'd like to get involved, reach out to someone and myself. We'd love to chat with you. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.